You ever walk into a room and feel someone's presence before they even say a word? Not because they were loud, not because they demanded attention, but because the way they carried themselves spoke louder than anything they could ever say. There's a reason why some people can command a conversation without raising their voice. Why certain individuals walk into meetings, interviews, even conflicts, and people pause, pay attention, and lean in. It's not magic. It's not luck. And it's not luck. And no, it's not just charisma. It's the way they talk. It's the way they use their words like tools, not weapons, not noise, but tools to shape how people see them, trust them, and follow them. Most people speak to be heard, but leaders speak to move people. They know when to speak up, and just as importantly, when to stay silent. They don't just say the right things, they say them in the right way, at the right moment, with the right energy. It's not just leadership, that's influence, and influence is power. Let me ask you something. Have you ever said something you thought was powerful, but it landed flat? Have you ever tried to make a point, only to be interrupted, ignored, or overlooked? Have you ever walked away from a conversation thinking, why didn't I say that differently? That ends today, because if you want to be taken seriously, if you want to lead, inspire, and influence at work, in your family, in your relationships, you have to learn how to talk like a leader. Not a boss, not a dictator, a leader. And the truth is, you don't need a title to start. You don't need permission. You just need the right mindset and the courage to own your voice. Let's talk about how most people believe that leadership starts when they open their mouth. But that's not true. Leadership starts in the space before the first word is spoken. It starts in the silence, in the way you walk into a room, in the way your eyes meet someone else's, in the way your energy introduces you before you say a single thing. Think about the most powerful people you've seen, leaders, commanders, high-level executives, or even someone from your personal life. They weren't always the loudest. They weren't trying to dominate every conversation. They weren't over-explaining themselves or filling up space with too many words. They knew that power doesn't need to prove itself. It just is. They had what we call presence, and presence is one of the most underestimated forms of communication. Presence isn't just about posture or a firm handshake. It's a form of silent language that says, I'm grounded. I know who I am. I don't need to perform to be respected. That kind of energy can't be faked, and it doesn't come from memorizing quotes or copying someone else's style. It comes from being so anchored in your self-worth that your mere presence demands respect. When you learn how to embody presence, you don't have to compete for attention. The room will naturally make space for you. And when you finally do speak, your words carry weight. Why? Because you didn't rush in. Because you didn't fill the air with nervous chatter. You gave people a reason to listen, not by being loud, but by being intentional. So many people think that if they don't talk fast or talk first, they'll lose their chance to lead. But that's fear talking, that's insecurity, trying to compensate. Leaders don't rush, they pause, they assess, they read the room, and when they speak, they do so with calm certainty. They know that silence isn't empty. It's powerful. It builds anticipation. It gives others time to digest what's already been said. And more importantly, it gives you time to choose your words wisely. This is where the principle of say less, mean more comes into play. In today's world where everyone is over-communicating, oversharing, over-explaining, there's something magnetic about a person who speaks only when they have something meaningful to say, who doesn't waste their word, who doesn't flood the conversation with noise. They are precise, intentional, and that makes them unforgettable. You've probably seen this dynamic play out in meetings or group conversations. One person dominates the entire room with their voice, talking in circles, trying to assert their knowledge. Then someone else, quiet the whole time, finally speaks, and their one sentence lands harder than the previous person's 5-minute monologue. Why? Because it wasn't about the quantity of words, it was about quality. And it was about timing, saying less but meaning more. Presence also teaches you how to control the temperature of the room. When emotions run high, when conflict arises, when tension thickens, you don't have to match the chaos. In fact, the most powerful thing you can do is remain calm, composed, still. That's when your presence becomes a stabilizer. A leader who keeps their cool gives others permission to regulate themselves too. You become the thermostat, not the thermometer. You set the tone. But here's the thing, you can't fake this. People can sense desperation. They can feel when someone is trying too hard to impress. Real presence isn't about acting tough. It's about being real, being self-assured without needing to explain yourself every 5 seconds. It's about being enough without needing validation. That also means learning to be comfortable with silence. Most people hate silence. They rush to fill it. But leaders, they understand that silence is a form of strength. It shows restraint. It shows control. When you can sit in the quiet and still hold the room, you've already won half the battle. Because now when you do speak, people know it matters. There's a tool I call the power pause. It's simple, but it's a game changer. Before you respond to a question, before you address a room, before you answer a challenge, pause. Just for a beat. It might feel awkward at first, but it works. That pause creates space. It shows you're not reacting, you're thinking. It gives you control, and it pulls people in. It makes them wait for your words, which instantly gives those words more impact. Presence also lives in your body language. Your posture, your facial expressions, your gestures. Are you shrinking, slouching, fidgeting, or are you standing tall, rooted, composed? Are your eyes darting nervously around, or are you holding steady, making intentional eye contact? All of that speaks before your mouth ever does. And people are watching, they're listening with their eyes before they listen with their ears. Your goal isn't to impress people with your vocabulary. Your goal is to influence them with your certainty. You don't need to be the most educated person in the room. You need to be the most grounded. And grounded people don't overtalk. They don't rush. They don't scramble for approval. They lead with presence. They lead with energy. They lead with confidence that doesn't need to be broadcasted. It just shows up. Remember this, people may forget what you said, but they will never forget how you made them feel when you walked in the room. Did you feel frantic, insecure, and loud, or did you carry stillness, certainty, and power? Say less, mean more. Let your presence speak louder than your words ever could. That's where real leadership begins. One of the most dangerous traps a leader can fall into is believing that complexity equals intelligence. That using big words, technical jargon, or over-explaining every idea will somehow make them sound more powerful, more impressive, more in control. But the truth is the exact opposite. Real leadership isn't about showing off what you know. It's about making sure everyone else understands where they're going, what they're doing, and why it matters. Clarity is power. People don't follow confusing leaders. They follow those who communicate in a way that is direct, intentional, and simple to grasp. When you speak with clarity, you leave no room for doubt, misunderstanding, or hesitation. You don't just speak to be heard. You speak to guide, to align, to move people. And when people understand you clearly, they trust you more deeply. That's the foundation of real influence. Now think about the last time someone gave you unclear instructions. Maybe a manager left a meeting with 10 different goals and no real direction. Maybe someone asked you to do something, but their request was so wrapped in uncertainty and fluff that you walked away more confused than when you started. How did that make you feel? Frustrated, disconnected, less confident? That's exactly how people feel when leaders don't command with clarity. They feel lost, they feel unsure, and that creates doubt, not just in the message, but in the person delivering it. And clarity creates momentum. When people know exactly what to do, why they're doing it, and what outcome is expected, they move faster, they act with confidence, they execute with precision. And all of that starts with the way you speak. It doesn't matter how brilliant your idea is, if no one can follow you through it. It doesn't matter how passionate you are, if your words are tangled, confusing communication weakens even the strongest leadership. That's why leaders must simplify. They must strip away everything that is unnecessary. They must cut the fat from their language, remove the clutter from their message, and make sure what remains is sharp, clear, and impactful. This takes discipline. It's easy to ramble. It's easy to fall into filler language, phrases like kinda, maybe, I think, just wanted to say. These small words dilute your message. They make you sound unsure, even when you aren't. And in leadership, perception is everything. You may feel confident, but if your words don't reflect that clarity, people won't hear you the way you need to be heard. So instead of saying, I just wanted to quickly touch base and maybe see if we could possibly shift the timeline. Say, let's move the timeline up. I'll explain why. Instead of saying, I think it might be a good idea to consider maybe switching strategies, say, we need a new strategy. Here's the plan. It's not about being rude or abrupt. It's about being clear. You're giving people the gift of direction. You're removing fog from their path. That's not harsh. That's leadership. The strongest communicators don't speak in circles. They speak in straight lines. They don't say more than necessary. They say exactly what's needed. No more, no less. And when things get tense, when the stakes are high, when emotions rise, clarity becomes even more critical. In chaos, people crave direction. They want to know who to follow and what to do. They don't want drama. They want decisions. They don't need fancy speeches. They need strong sentences. If you can be that person, the one who steps into confusion and brings order with a few powerful words, then you are a leader, whether you have the title or not. Leadership language also requires boldness. You have to be willing to be clear, even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable. That means saying the hard things. It means addressing the elephant in the room. It means giving feedback that may sting, but that ultimately helps. Don't hide behind niceties. Don't sugarcoat truth until it's unrecognizable. Say what needs to be said. Say it respectfully, but say it clearly. That's courage. And clarity doesn't mean cold. It doesn't mean robotic or emotionless. You can speak with clarity and still speak with empathy. In fact, clarity amplifies empathy because people don't have to guess at your intentions. They know exactly where you stand. That builds trust. That creates safety. People don't feel blindsided or manipulated. They feel respected. One of the most effective techniques you can use is the statement sandwich. Start with truth. Be direct about what's happening or what needs to be done. Then provide value, explain the reasoning, the benefit, or the bigger picture. Finally, end with vision. Where are we headed? What's possible? What does success look like? This structure is simple, but powerful. It gives people clarity, connection, and motivation, all in a few well-crafted sentences. Let's be clear. Leadership is not about being the smartest person in the room. It's about making the room smarter because of how you speak. It's not about proving you know everything. It's about helping people see what matters most. When you command with clarity, people move faster, they work better, they feel safer, and they trust you more deeply. You eliminate confusion, you eliminate fear, you create focus. And in a world full of noise, the ability to cut through with a clear voice is what separates real leaders from everyone else. So ask yourself, are your words leading people forward? Or are they getting lost in translation? Are you speaking with intention, or are you just filling space? Are you giving direction or just information? Because how you speak determines what happens next. Speak with clarity and watch your leadership rise. Owning a room has nothing to do with being the loudest, most dominant person in it. It's not about overpowering others or constantly being at the center of attention. Owning a room means walking into any environment, whether it's a meeting, a conversation, a negotiation, or even a social gathering, and radiating a calm, quiet authority that says, I know who I am and I belong here. And the most powerful thing about that, you don't need permission from anyone to do it. You don't need a title, you don't need a microphone, you don't need to be introduced, you don't even need everyone in the room to like you. You just need presence, you need confidence, you need inner certainty that doesn't beg for validation. Most people enter a room checking who's in charge, where they rank, how they're being perceived. They start adjusting themselves, shrinking, people-pleasing, second-guessing what to say. That's not power. That's insecurity, dressed in politeness. A leader doesn't ask, is it okay if I speak? A leader knows when to speak because their message comes from intention, not ego. Owning a room starts before you even open your mouth. It begins with how you carry yourself. Are your shoulders back? Is your posture grounded? Are you rushing in with anxiety? Or are you stepping in with control? You don't need to perform. You need to be solid. You don't need to take space. You need to hold space. People can sense when someone walks in with grounded confidence. They pause, they notice, they may not know why, but something about that person makes them feel they're someone to pay attention to. That's presence. That's what ownership looks like without even speaking. Now, here's a secret. That kind of presence doesn't come from external things. It doesn't come from how expensive your clothes are or how many people you know or how many likes you get on social media. It comes from a decision to stop waiting for permission to show up fully, a decision to stop apologizing for your voice, a decision to stop shrinking to make others comfortable. People give away their power all the time without realizing it. They wait to be asked. They wait to be introduced. They wait to be noticed. But leadership doesn't wait. It acts. And you don't have to storm into a room to do it. In fact, the most powerful people are often the most composed ones. They don't need to rush. They don't need to dominate. They speak when it's time. And when they do, people listen. Because here's the truth. When you speak with intention, people feel it. When you speak from a place of calm certainty, your words carry weight. You don't need to yell. You don't need to prove yourself. You need to be clear. You need to be steady. That's what makes people trust you. That's what makes people follow you. When you walk into a room, instead of asking, what do they think of me? Ask, what do I bring here today? Instead of worrying, will I be accepted? Ask, how will I lead this space? You're not there to fit in. You're there to contribute, to influence, to elevate. And that begins with the energy you bring. Here's another powerful shift. Stop trying to impress people. That mindset puts you below them. It makes you perform rather than lead. When you walk into a room trying to impress others, you're giving them control. But when you walk in focused on impact, on making a difference, on contributing something meaningful, that's when you step into real authority. Owning the room also means owning your voice. And that doesn't mean you speak the most. It means you speak the clearest. You speak with purpose. You say what matters and you don't say what doesn't. You don't ramble to fill silence. You use silence as a tool. You let people sit with your words. You let your message breathe. And here's the real test. Can you still own the room even when you're being challenged? Can you keep your composure when someone disagrees, questions, or disrespects you? Because leadership isn't about being liked all the time. It's about being respected. And respect comes when people see that you won't crumble under pressure, that you can handle confrontation without becoming reactive, that you can hold your ground without losing your cool. That's why preparation matters. Leaders don't just walk in and wing it. They prepare. They study, they think through the message they want to deliver. And because they're prepared, they're more present. They're not scrambling in their head. They're grounded in the moment. That makes their energy cleaner, more focused, more magnetic. You have to remember, people don't just listen to what you say, they feel how you say it. And they decide, often subconsciously, whether to trust you, follow you, or ignore you within seconds. So you don't get a second chance to establish presence. That's why you train yourself to own the room every time you walk into one. Not just the big rooms, but the small ones too. The hallway conversations, the one-on-ones, the everyday moments where leadership is either built or broken. You don't need to dominate. You need to be undeniable, not by force, but by presence, by clarity, by conviction. And all of that starts inside you. It starts with the belief that you do belong, that you do have something to say, that you do deserve to be heard, not because someone gave you permission, but because you claimed your space. So the next time you step into a room, remind yourself you don't need to take over. You just need to show up fully, with purpose, with pause, with power. Don't wait for the room to give you permission. You already have it. Own it. When most people speak, their goal is to be liked, to sound smart, or to win approval. They choose their words to impress. They chase reactions. They want people to think, wow, they're so confident, or they really know their stuff. But leaders don't speak to impress. They speak to empower, and that difference changes everything. The person who speaks to impress is focused on themselves. Every word, every sentence is a performance. Their energy is self-centered. It's about looking good, sounding polished, appearing dominant. But the person who speaks to empower shifts the focus outward. They speak to lift others, to unlock something in the listener, to move people toward action, growth, and transformation. That is the kind of speech that leaves a lasting impact. People don't remember perfect speeches. They remember how someone's words made them feel. They remember the truth that hit them right in the gut. They remember the message that shook something, awakened them. And you don't get that by trying to impress. You get that by being real, being clear, and speaking from a place of service, not ego. Leadership communication is rooted in connection. When you speak as a leader, your goal isn't to shine brighter than everyone else. It's to light something inside the people around you. It's to make people believe in their own strength. It's to pull people up, not put yourself above. Think about the leaders you've respected most in your life. The ones who made you want to rise, to grow, to become better. They weren't reciting rehearsed lines to sound important. They spoke with heart. They asked questions that made you think differently. They told stories that made you see yourself more clearly. They saw your potential, and they used their words to help you see it too. That's the power of speaking to empower. It builds people, it strengthens teams, it transforms relationships. And it's not always about giving a big motivational speech. Sometimes it's as simple as saying, I see you, I believe in you, you've got this. Those few words can do more for someone's confidence than a 10-minute monologue filled with fancy language and technical brilliance. Empowering communication is also about listening. Great leaders don't just speak well, they listen deeply. They pay attention to what's not being said. They respond to the needs of the moment. They don't just deliver information, they deliver insight, and that comes from being tuned in, not tuned out. When you're focused on impressing, you often miss what the other person truly needs. You're so caught up in saying something impressive that you forget to ask the right questions. You forget to pause and check in. You talk at people, not to them. And people can feel that. They can feel when someone is speaking for applause versus speaking to serve. On the other hand, when you speak to empower, your words become tools of encouragement, not weapons of superiority. You ask things like, what do you need right now? What's holding you back? How can I support you in stepping into your next level? These are the kinds of questions that create space for growth. They open the door to real conversations, real progress, and real transformation. You also learn to shift your language from doubt to belief. Instead of saying, are you sure you can do this? You say, I know you've got this. What do you need to get started? Instead of saying, that's going to be hard, you say, this will challenge you, but you're capable of handling it. Your words become mirrors that reflect strength back to people who may have forgotten they had it. And here's the truth. When you focus on empowering others, you actually become more impressive. Not because you tried to be, but because people remember how you made them feel. They remember that you saw them, that you respected them, that you helped them rise. There's nothing more magnetic than a person who speaks with intention, humility, and strength all at once. That kind of person doesn't need to dominate the room. They don't need constant praise. They don't need to hear, wow, that was amazing. What they hear instead is, because of what you said, I believe I can. That's the real reward, not applause, but impact. Speaking to empower also means being honest. It means saying the hard truth when it needs to be said, not to shame, but to sharpen. Real leaders know that growth comes through discomfort. And sometimes empowering someone means telling them what no one else will. But again, it's about intention. Are you correcting them to tear them down or to help them rise? Your tone matters, your timing matters, your heart behind the message matters. If your words come from a place of care, people can feel it. Even if the truth stings, they'll respect it. Because deep down, we all want to grow. We all want someone to help us see what we're capable of. And sometimes that starts with a bold voice saying, you're better than this. Step up. You don't need to wear a crown to speak like a leader. You don't need to impress rooms full of strangers. You need to show up every day with the intention to build others, to speak life, to speak truth, and to speak with courage. And the most beautiful part, you don't lose your power by giving it away. You multiply it. The more you empower others, the more powerful your voice becomes, because it stops being just yours. It becomes a voice that echoes in the lives you've touched. So stop trying to impress. Start speaking to empower. Your words are not a performance. They are a tool. Use them wisely, use them boldly, and use them to build something that lasts far beyond you. When a leader walks into a room, they don't just walk into a conversation, they walk into a frame. A frame is the emotional and mental space where communication happens. It's the tone, the energy, the direction of the interaction. Most people let others set the frame. They react to what's already been laid out. But real leaders, they control the frame. They decide what energy will rule the room. They don't get pulled into chaos. They pull the room into clarity. Every conversation has a frame. Every moment of tension, every disagreement, every decision-making scenario, there's a frame already in place, whether you realize it or not. And if you don't step up and take control of it, someone else will. That someone might be loud. They might be emotional. They might be manipulative. Or they might be completely lost. But if they take the frame and you simply react, you've already given your power away. Leaders don't react. They respond. That's not just a communication skill, it's an emotional discipline. The ability to pause, breathe, assess, and then act with purpose is one of the most powerful traits any leader can develop. Because when you react, you give away control. When you respond, you keep it. Imagine being in a high-stakes meeting where someone questions your decisions in front of everyone. Most people would get defensive. They'd raise their voice, fire back, or feel the need to justify themselves on the spot. But the leader who controls the frame pauses. They look directly at the person, grounded, calm, and say something like, "That's a fair question. Let's explore it." Just like that, they've shifted the energy. They didn't match the attack. They redirected the conversation. That's frame control. This skill isn't just for boardrooms. It applies to personal relationships, conflicts, negotiations, and any environment where emotions can run high. The moment someone pushes your buttons, they're testing whether they can control the frame. And your reaction tells them everything they need to know. If you get triggered easily, if you respond with emotion instead of reason, if you raise your voice or lose your calm, you've given them the steering wheel. But if you stay steady, if you slow your tone, if you lean in rather than lash out, you send a message. I am in control here, not of you, but of myself, and that's the beginning of powerful leadership. Let's be clear, responding doesn't mean being passive. It doesn't mean letting things slide. It means you choose the most effective response, not the first emotional impulse. You stay clear-headed, intentional, and focused on outcome, not ego. That might mean asking a question instead of making a statement. It might mean saying less, not more. It might even mean walking away until the situation cools and clarity returns. People often confuse reacting with strength. They think snapping back or clapping back proves confidence, but true confidence doesn't need to prove itself. It doesn't need to win every argument. It doesn't need to dominate every interaction. It chooses strategy over impulse. That's what makes leaders effective, not just loud. Think about the last time you were triggered. Really triggered. Someone said something that made you feel disrespected, dismissed, or misunderstood. Maybe your first instinct was to defend yourself, prove your point, or correct them instantly. But what if in that moment you had paused? Just a breath, just long enough to ask yourself, what's the outcome I want here? Is it to win the argument, or is it to lead this conversation toward resolution, growth, or truth? That tiny pause is where power lives. In that moment, you take back the frame. You stop playing the other person's game and start guiding the situation with clarity and purpose. Controlling the frame also means controlling your language. Instead of saying, "You always do this," which triggers defensiveness, you say, "Here's what I observed and here's what I need moving forward." That's a frame shift. Instead of, "Why would you even say that?" You say, "Let's bring the focus back to what matters." Again, frame shift. It's not about the words being soft. It's about them being effective. Strong leaders use words that redirect, refocus, and reframe. They speak like a compass, not a hammer. Even your body language plays a role. Leaders who control the frame don't fidget. They don't lean back nervously or cross their arms defensively. They stand or sit with grounded energy. They make eye contact. They breathe. They let silence work for them, because silence used with confidence is not a gap, it's a message. Silence can diffuse tension. It can create space for people to rethink. It can make your words more powerful when they do come. So don't rush to fill every pause. Let your calm become the loudest thing in the room. And here's something else. When you control the frame, you give others a model. People begin to mirror your composure. They start to slow down their own reactions. They step into a better version of themselves simply because your energy gives them the permission to. That's the ripple effect of leadership. Every interaction is a chance to lead. Every difficult conversation is an invitation to either react or rise. When you choose to respond instead of react, you elevate not just your leadership, but the entire room. So don't be quick to answer, be quick to assess. Don't be the person who jumps to defend. Be the one who leans in to understand, then responds with clarity and control. That's how you protect your power. That's how you lead people, not just manage situations. You control the frame not by overpowering others, but by mastering yourself, not by silencing others, but by elevating the conversation. And that's the kind of leadership the world is starving for. Calm, certain, unshakable, not reactive, but responsive. And that right there is where your true influence begins. Leadership isn't about having all the answers. It's not about being the loudest voice in the room or having a fancy title. Real leadership is about how you show up in your words, your energy, your silence, your presence. It's how you choose to speak with intention, act with clarity, and lead with purpose. You don't need to wait for someone to hand you a microphone. You don't need permission to lead. You just need the courage to own your voice and the discipline to use it wisely. Speak less, but mean more. Be direct, not complicated. Show up with quiet confidence, not desperate noise. Talk to lift others, not to validate yourself. And when the pressure rises, don't react. Respond. Hold the frame. Protect your power. Because at the end of the day, people may forget what you said, but they will never forget how your words made them feel. Did you speak life into them? Did you inspire strength? Did you leave them more confident, more focused, more capable than before? That's what real leaders do. They don't impress, they impact. So speak like a leader, walk like one, and most importantly, be one. The world doesn't need more noise. It needs your voice, clear, steady, and unapologetically powerful.